Right now, your department is funded through basic property tax levy, correct?
Yes, 99% of our budget is through property tax. We do have fire protection contracts with municipal entities, which is about 1% of our budget, and new construction revenue adds a little bit every year as well.
But with a fire benefit charge, which is what you're asking voters to approve in this election, you change the formula, you change the way your revenue is calculated and how it's divided. So under the fire benefit charge, the property tax levy goes down.
Yes.
But how do you make up for that with the charge itself?
Yes, so we give up 33% of our revenue by reducing property taxes, so we have to make that back, and we make that back with the benefit charge, and that's based on the square footage of the occupancy, and it's divided in 3 categories between residential, apartment complexes, and commercial buildings.
And to a certain extent, you expect residential homeowners to see a bit of a decrease in the amount of tax they're paying for their fire protection, even though it would amount to better, more consistent revenue for your department.
Yes, currently, as it sits, 54% of the people pay what they currently pay or less. And the mechanics of it are, our budget can only grow by 1%. So as we get this growth we've had, which is between 10, 15, 17% year over year for several years, we don't get to capture that growth. We often get asked, well, we see all this growth, you have to be rolling in revenue. That's not the case. Microsoft, for example, could put $1 trillion worth of buildings in service today. We would get a little spike of new construction revenue. It would go on the tax roll the following year. Our rate would go down from $1.50 to say 50 cents with $1 trillion going into it, because we can only go up by 1%. With the fire benefit charge, we could charge the benefit to that new property that was placed in service, which would allow us to track for inflation, which would then allow us to not necessarily have to pass on any costs to anybody else in our jurisdiction. That's a way it can work.
When a residential person's fire benefit charge is calculated, what's the structure? What are the factors that go into that?
The factor that goes into it is, it's literally a factor. So we determine a mathematical factor to charge, which in this year's case is 0.43. 0.43 multiplied through this equation times a cost per gallon times the square footage gives you what you pay for residential.
But the outcome in some of the examples that I've seen put forward by the department, the owner of a 2,500 square foot home in Douglas County with a $600,000 paid appraised value paid $750 under the fire levy, under the existing levy, but could probably see only about $718 if the fire benefit charge were applied to them.
Yes. Yes, so if someone pays less, someone else has to pay more. The large commercial buildings end up paying more. However, we're very cognizant of trying to not to disparately impact anybody. 57% of the businesses pay what they currently pay or less. And we have the opportunity to perfect this each year. Fairness is subjective, yet the beauty of this, unlike any other funding mechanism, is we at the local level get to hear from the public, and our commissioners get to set this rate every year.
The voters have to reapprove this. Assuming they approve it this year, they would have to approve it again 6 years from now, 6 years again after that. But in the meantime, the commissioners are able to adjust and balance those rates annually.
Yes, the public, if they don't like the way this operates, can vote it out in 6 years. We believe they're going to really appreciate the way this works, and it's going to allow us to provide for this level of service in perpetuity.
The fire benefit charge, Brian, makes a distinction between residential, commercial, industrial, I assume. Is it making changes based on fire risk? Now, certain industrial pursuits, for instance, are known to have greater danger of fire, or you have more response time, more frequent response times to certain industries. Does that factor into the fire benefit charge that's applied to those industrial clients?
The risk is implied in the square footage. I realize some of our verbiage that's out there states that the building's use, risk, and size, but the risk factors are implied. The larger the square footage, the more difficult it is for us to fight fire in. Quantity of personnel, quantity of apparatus, and every time you turn a corner with a hose line, that's a friction point, and you need to assign people to manage those friction points to keep advancing the hose. The larger the building, the greater the risk. But that is not factored in to the fire benefit charge. It is purely square footage. And that would go right to the residential areas. People have asked, well, my home is right on the wildland urban interface line. I'm bordering the sagebrush and cheatgrass. My home's a higher risk than a home in the city. Am I going to be charged more? No. We're looking at it simply from the your house is on fire aspect, not from a wildfire hitting your home, but just your house catches on fire. The demand for our services are the same based on your square footage.
Well, insurance companies, for instance, look at the WUI, at the wildland urban interface, and they say, your rate's going to be higher, or in some cases, we're not going to insure you at all because your fire risk is, in fact, quite high compared to a denser urban area. So, but that's not a factor that's taken into account under this charge.
No, and that's one of the things we considered. The insurance industry is unjustly and unfairly raising people's premiums or canceling their policies based on risk being determined on a larger scale. They may be looking at it on the parcel level, but Jefferson, we haven't lost a house in our jurisdiction in 9 years. And there's homes that are within the city limits that are getting their premiums raised for reasons that we can't explain. The Washington Survey and Rating Bureau currently has us at a 4 and a 5. We're being reevaluated as we speak. It may be a 4 in totality. So we have a good rating, and that is supposed to translate directly to your insurance premiums. So it frustrates us that the insurance companies wouldn't be rewarding their people for investing in their fire department.
Now, the fire benefit charge sounds like kind of an innovative feature, but you're not the first department who would have adopted this. Other departments in the state that you know of that have taken this on?
Yes, there's about 20 districts, municipalities that have had this in place, and we have watched how it's worked for them. It's worked very well. It's been renewed repeatedly. One jurisdiction failed theirs on the next go-around, of which I could understand why. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and you have to get it right. On an annual basis, you need to get it right to keep the confidence of the voters.
Now, voters in both Chelan and Douglas counties will be voting on this because your district covers both sides of the river and stretches up and down pretty far. Is there a margin that's in particular that's needed for this to pass? Does this need a supermajority?
This needs a supermajority. However, there's no voter turnout requirement. And we are sensitive to it's the totality of our jurisdiction in both Chelan and Douglas County. And we realize there's more voters in Chelan County than Douglas County, so Chelan County could set the tone for how the election goes. And we can't help that. That's unfortunate, but that's how the RCW is written. The Wenatchee Valley Fire Department took the stance to mitigate that to the best of our ability by keeping the 2 former jurisdictions intact and electing 3 commissioners from each jurisdiction. So albeit there's a disparity in the voters on each side, you have equal representation from your elected officials.
What happens for Wenatchee Valley Fire Department if this is not passed, Brian?
We will run this again because we believe it just takes time to inform the public on how this works. It's new to Eastern Washington, and if it doesn't pass, we would then go back to the traditional way of resetting the levy, which is more punitive because that causes the spikes in taxation where the fire benefit charge does not. And we will have to pass another levy. The cost of doing business is what it is. We're not immune from inflation. And with revenue only going up 1% of your prior year's budget, that's not tracking with any financial metric. That's not tracking the CPI. That's the other nice thing about the fire benefit charge. Let's pray inflation goes back down to normal levels. Well, we, on an annual basis, can just track with inflation and be precise with our budgeting and our ask of the voters. We don't want to ask for any more money than we need, but under other excess levy measures, we have to make projections, and we can't run out of money, and that those excess levies have to last for 6 years. So the possibility of us asking for more money than we need exists, and that's an unfortunate outcome. This eliminates that. If our projections aren't right, it's only a 12-month span that we have to tighten the belt and live through that. And we don't have to panic if inflation does take a spike that economists think will just be a short-lived. We can weather that with the fire benefit charge.
Is there a mechanism for the commissioners to step in between periods, between annual votes on the fire benefit charge, and make tweaks and adjustments on an emergency basis?
No. No, it's set. We file it by November, and it's set for the year.
If this were not to pass, and barring, say, passage of a second levy, is your department looking at a financial crisis in its upcoming fiscal year without it?
Not in the upcoming. However, we're not funding ourselves appropriately because our revenue only goes up $200,000 a year, and the cost of a fire engine alone has doubled in 4 years. So when you look at what we have the equivalent of an equipment replacement, rental and replacement fund, like a municipality has, we have to invest using cost of capital in that fleet replacement program to replace our fire apparatus on a 25-year interval. Now, we're not investing in that fund like we should because our revenue increase doesn't match inflation. The benefit charge will allow us to do that.
It should be pointed out for voters that there is on the WenatcheeValleyFire.org website a calculator to help you determine what you might be paying based on your home's assessed valuation. That calculator is not always available, I guess, because some of the numbers have to be readjusted over time. You found some issues that you needed to correct, so it wasn't operating as of this morning.
Yes, we took the calculator down on Friday because now that the public is using the calculator, and we encourage you to use the calculator, we found discrepancies in Department of Revenue use codes that were resulting in residential properties being charged as commercial properties. And we also found that if you were in a condo complex and you had a common building in there, that every condo was being charged for the square footage of that common building plus their condo. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So we took the calculator down, repopulated the data. The calculator should be live again today, and please check it. We want to field all questions and find everything that we need to fix. And the other departments that have passed this have told us, in the first year, you'll get a lot of public input and perfect the database, and from year 2 on, they've never really heard from anybody again.
WenatcheeValleyFire.org is the website. Go check out your calculator there. Chief Brian Brett, Wenatchee Valley Fire Department, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks, Jefferson.
The election finishes up on August 6th. Check your ballot. If you live in the Wenatchee Valley Fire Protection District, this is one to vote on. Jefferson Robbins, NCW Live.